Record. So, well, hello everybody, and welcome to this. It's an IEA Denmark panel night, and what we intend to do is hopefully have a night where we can share our passion for the Enneagram, but also talk about some of the things that is currently taking a lot of our attention. So. My name is Patrick, and I'm in the IEA Denmark board together with Annabella Al-Nafusi. She's here, yeah. And we're gonna be your host tonight. And we are also in the committee for the Nordic Enneagram Conference in Stockholm here in May. And in this process, we actually we reached out to some of our good friends who's also going to participate at the conference, but whom we also are doing some of these Enneagram stuff with. So, but I will let them introduce themselves in a minute. Tonight's going to be a special night because we're not just going to talk about Enneagram theory, Enneagram type. We're actually going to talk about what's happening in the world. Yeah, Annabella, what do you think?
Yeah, so things changed a little bit. So we are very happy to have our friends Frederik and Nhien here, because you are participating in lots of different things in our program in the Nordic conference, and your expertise is really broad. So usually we talk sexuality and love and development and instincts, but today we will talk about Ukraine as well. And I look really forward to hearing what you have to say. Will you introduce yourself, Frederik?
Yes, thanks, Patrick and Annabella. Happy to be here and happy to see some of the familiar faces and happy to see faces that I don't know yet. But yes, I'm Frederik Coene. I'm actually I'm a diplomat. I'm based in Ukraine normally, but in my free time, I'm dealing with the Enneagram. So for the last few years, I've been doing quite some research on the Enneagram, mainly focusing on everything related to sex and sexuality. And I'll indeed be also at the conference in Stockholm, and I hope many of you will be there as well. And you'll come to my session, which is going to be on the levels of development. And I'm actually going to look at an older model of ego density. It's a Vedic model, basically. And it's an interesting model because it actually helps to combine the Enneagram also with spiral dynamics. So it's a different perception. It's not better or worse than the other levels of development models that are out there, but it just has its pros and cons. And of course, I will also be at these late night talks around sex and sexuality. Because it's something that I've been working on for a few years, and there's quite a lot to be said there. And I think it's going to be an interesting new format. So I think that I've seen the plan or the agenda for the conference. It looks very interesting. I think there's quite some innovations in there. And actually, I'm not only going to Sweden. Actually, the weekend before, I will be going to Denmark together with Valerie, who's also on there somewhere. Yes, hi, Valerie. Basically, together with Valerie, we'll be doing a workshop, 2.5 days in Roskilde for the Danes among you. So it's with Klaus Roger, who's hosting us there. And for 2.5 days, we'll do a workshop on sex and sexuality and the Enneagram. So hope to see some of you there as well. So yeah, that's briefly about me and the Enneagram, right?
Yeah, and then we also have Nhien here with us today. Hi, Nhien.
Hello, so good to be here among friends. So just to briefly introduce myself, I'm Reverend Nhien Vuong, and you could definitely just call me Nhien. And that's better. I mean, some of my friends, it's like, hey, you know, so I answer to all of those. So I am I'm the founder of Evolving Enneagram. And so we're focused on transformation of individuals and communities around the world. It's a spiritually based program, but an interspiritual program, so a non-dogmatic spiritually based program. I am here because I love the people hosting this group here. And I'm here because I really believe in this notion of, I mean, I'm very idealistic. I believe that we're capable of bringing love like to the world. I believe the Enneagram community is here to play a vital part in that. And so this topic of love across borders is very dear to my heart. I will, just like Frederik, I will be presenting at this upcoming Nordic conference. And my first presentation will be on evolving together. So that, you know, that spirit of unity and togetherness. I will also be co-facilitating with Patrick the Enneagram After Dark event, which is focused on sexuality and the Enneagram. So, you know, Frederik, Patrick, Annabella, and I like to talk about the easiest topics, right? You know, so sexuality and the Enneagram. And then I'll also be involved in this innovative model of like circling the types, like these panels that are involved in supporting us in getting to know how types relate to one another, right? An intimate relationship or connection. And so that will be an exciting thing that's happening. And again, why I'm super excited about this is, you know, right now, the Enneagram, like, information is widely available, right, on the internet, but connection is not. And so, yeah, the importance of this gathering, how we're connecting with individuals from across the globe, how this Nordic conference is like uniquely designed to be about like that human touch is just really, really exciting to me. And so even kind of following through on that, just as Frederik will be in Denmark the week before the conference, I, along with Annabella, and hopefully Patrick as well, and others here, will be in just outside of Copenhagen, doing a day-long retreat around the Enneagram, A Circle of Love. So again, this very appropriate theme of this year, I believe, and we'll talk more about it here today. I think the context of love and evolving love in the midst of a world at war, right? So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nhien. So some weeks ago, the world changed. I mean, normally we were having meetings discussing Enneagram types and sexuality and stuff like that. And out of a sudden, Frederik had to run, had to go. He had a situation that was very close to him, and we all has been affected by it ever since. So, Frederik, would you please share a little bit with all of us what happened and how are you today, and what have you learned so far about this situation, and combined with the knowledge you have on Enneagram?
Yeah, indeed. Well, tomorrow it'll be 1 month, right? On the 24th of February, the war started in Ukraine. Some people of you know that I was living in Ukraine, actually. I have been a diplomat there for the past 3.5 years. So Ukraine is basically the place where I live, where I work, where kids go to school, where our second kid was born, where I have my friends, and where my social life is actually taking place. And then suddenly, 10 days before the war started, basically, we were told everybody has to leave. You basically have like 1-2 days, just get out of the country because there will be war. There was intelligence information pointing at that. And I was actually I didn't believe it at all. And most of my colleagues didn't believe it at all. I mean, many people just left very quickly, and I just sat down, took a deep breath, and I said, look, indeed, probably it's better to leave. And I had the feeling that we're not going to come back very quickly. So instead of taking the first plane out, I said to my wife, let's just pack everything in the car that we can take with us. Everything that is dear to our heart, let's take it with us. I forgot all my Enneagram books, of course. So probably that's some kind of sign that maybe it's not that dear to my heart after all. Now, so basically we were lucky. I mean, I call myself and my family some kind of 5-star refugees because we were able to leave before it all started. We could just drive out of the country. People 10 days later it took them 5 days to get out of the country. It took only 8-9 hours. So Yeah, everything changed because we had to come back to the Czech Republic, where my wife grew up and where we have a house. But we're basically just waiting here. I mean, we have lots of work to do, but we don't know when we're going to go back. Maybe we go back in a few weeks. Maybe it'll take a few years. Who knows? But apart from my work as a diplomat, because I'm in charge of development cooperation for the EU, so I'm basically the head of a team of 50 people, and that is running all the EU-funded projects in Ukraine. Apart from that, we also decided that we should, on a more personal note, try to support some refugees. And so we basically went to the border. We met some people, took them to our places, and Nhien is going to say a little bit more because she did some fundraising, and that really helped a lot and is still helping many people that are refugees and people that are trapped still in Ukraine. But yeah, what I wanted to talk about a little bit is just how, because it's a talk about the Enneagram here, right? And basically, my analytical mind is always switched on, and I've always, in the past few weeks, I've always tried to understand, like, what is happening? Like, why are people doing what they are doing? What are the different behaviors of refugees, for example? And I could find quite a few interesting trends, I would say, and I also spoke to some people and friends and so on. And I think, again, the instincts are very interesting here, because many people who are self-preservation dominant, they have this internal dilemma, like, am I going to stay home because my home base is what is important for me, right? I don't want to leave. I spent 20 years building my house. I'm not just going to leave it. But from the other side, there is this question like, but what about my personal safety? So there's a huge dilemma in the self-preservation dominant people. Many of the social dominant people I saw actually do not want to leave. They say, we want to stay here because we still want to support other people. There's many people who cannot leave. And actually, most of the people that I know and that Nhien and her friends have been gathering money for, most of the people who are supporting people still there are actually social dominant people. They are, and they're actually all self-pres blind, because many of them actually go outside when they know there may be shooting. And actually some people, I mean, fortunately, nobody that I know, but there are some people who are actually trying to help others, bringing food to elderly and so on, who actually got killed trying to help other people. And these were mainly social dominant and self-pres blind people. And actually about the sexual dominant people, I don't really know. I haven't noticed them. I mean, maybe these are the ones who just said, we're going to fight. I don't know. I cannot say anything about them. But also the type comes up very, very interestingly. Like was like one self-pres 6 refugee who was hyper pragmatic. I mean, being self-pres 6, I could understand him very well. He was really like thinking, okay, what are my different options? Where can I go? Which country of the EU am I going to select? Because each different EU member state has a different package. Like some offer this type of housing, these offer like, in this country, I can more easily find a job. In this country, they're giving this kind of social benefits and they give you like so many euros per month. And in others, they don't. Or maybe I should go to Dubai because I have a friend who's a fitness trainer. I'm a fitness trainer too, so I can set up my own job there. So some people are super pragmatic. But then we have, for example, another one. She's a self-pres 7 and she's sitting basically in the room next door here. She's super positive. She said like, oh, why would I leave? I mean, nothing's really happening. We were basically pushing her. We said, look, you have a daughter, at least don't let your 6-year-old daughter sit in a place where just rockets are just launching, just flying over your head.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But this self-pres 7 is like, yeah, but come on, we'll go back very quickly. Things are fine. It's not that bad. Yeah, they're shooting in Kiev, but at least our little district in Kiev is fine because we're somehow saved. So there's really like, she's full of stress, undoubtedly. But she's just somehow trying to overcompensate with all kinds of positive thinking. And again, that's good, right? Because this helps her, it's her survival mechanism. I have a colleague, another example, a social 2, and she was really thinking like, where am I going to go? Because I want to go to a city where there's many people around and where I can easily interact with other people. typical social two behavior in her. She was already thinking like, where do I have friends, where, and so on. It was interesting. And then I've also noticed that some of the assertive types, so the 3s, the 7s, and especially the 8s, they just come, they get registered, they go immediately to the labor place, I mean, where you can find jobs, and they immediately try to settle a new life. I mean, they arrived, yes, they have everything back there in Ukraine still, but they're like, we're just going to make things happen here. We don't know how long, but maybe we'll set up our life here. And then there's other people. I mean, I was speaking to a 6 actually yesterday, and she was like, how can they? I mean, they're leaving their country. They're so positive. How can they forget about what's happening in Ukraine? People get killed and they're just setting up a new life. I mean, how is this possible? Also a 4 that I was speaking to was also very negative about these people who are like forsaking their own country. So you can really see different trends in these refugees. But then also from the side of the people who are trying to support these refugees, you also see different behavior. Because what I have noticed is that actually most of the support that is coming to these refugees is not true altruism. It's very much coming from a very reactive mode from certain people. Why? Because very often people who are offering their houses and apartments for refugees to stay in, they're very happy for 2-3 days. And then it's like after 1 week, it's like, you cannot tell this refugee that actually they're there for a week already. But these refugees are here to stay for quite some time. And actually, if you want to support and help refugees, it's a highly responsible thing. It means you have to do it with a lot of awareness. You cannot just impulsively and in a reactive mode say, oh, I'm going to do this and that and that and that, and then a week later you just drop them. It's a commitment you take, right? It's like, I mean, it's like adopting a child, right? You just allow people to stay with you. So, and I think that this is going to be a big question because many people are supporting, and that's very good, but we also need to make sure that it's going to last for some time. And maybe the last thing that I want to say is an example of a 2. Basically, there's a 2 that I don't know directly, but a friend of mine told the story. There was a 2, and she took in her house about 4 refugees. And of course, these are 4 more people to eat. So she was spending basically all her money on food and then also for clothes for these people who are staying with her. And after about 2.5 weeks, she was getting really fed up because she was like spending all her money, but she could not tell them like, look, I mean, I financially can no longer afford taking care of you. But actually these people themselves were also looking like, what are different options? They didn't want to stay with her forever because, well, they also want to have like their own place. They're also thinking, maybe where can we go where we can find a job? So she was actually thinking that she was hoping that they would leave. But then the moment when they said themselves that, hey, you know, we found a place, an apartment where we can stay with our own family, she got really offended. She got really upset. And she's like, how dare they? How dare they just leave me now after everything that I've been doing for them? So, I mean, it's just a nice caricature story, but it's just the daily life of what we are seeing around us here. So, I mean, that's basically what I wanted to say about what I've been noticing in terms of what's happening.
And thank you so much for that one, Frederik. And Nhien, we know that you, as Frederik mentioned, you also got yourself involved in this situation actually quite fast. So
yeah, wow. Well, I just want to begin by sharing that I just feel like if people could appreciate how amazing it is that Frederik is even here today, given what I know about what has happened in his life, and his work schedule is extraordinary. And I mean, he's kind of downplayed it, but like what various homes or apartments like he and his family have, they've offered to we'll call them displaced individuals now, you know, not branding them as refugees quite yet, you know, kind of keeping that spacious, but just honoring that, like, you've been in the midst of a lot of turmoil. But when Annabella asked me about speaking on love and who would I like to speak with, I mean, it felt like a natural thing to invite you, Frederik, to speak to this very important topic. And so I just want to honor that like the things that you're tangibly doing, you know, even as like your mind is like analyzing the very people, you know, before you, but the things you're actually doing in support of, you know, our larger global community. So that's the first piece that comes up for me. And the second piece is that personally, I guess I was going to share more in terms of some of my Enneagram related thoughts, but I guess I want to begin by sharing personally. For those who don't know me, I was born in Saigon, Vietnam during the war. So I was actually born, like when you see those pictures of those kids that are like born during the fighting. And so like that context is very real and very alive for me. And those who are close to me already know like something about like the first pictures that came out around the displaced individuals, like just struck me in a way that nothing recently has, you know, because, you know, there are so many needs in the world, right? Why am I particularly called to this? Well, it was deeply personal. And the image that flashed before me is in a video that Frederik and I recorded to kind of share about the plight of the Ukrainians right now. But it's a picture of me with my grandmother in Vietnam, you know, just basically like during the war, before we fled as refugees to the United States. So that picture and this idea that like, that's me, but that seems so far away and so foreign. And how is what is foreign historically to us no longer that way anymore? How is the world like this global community now? How is what's happening there happening to me and to us? You know, like that was the first like gesture of heart that's like something I need to do something and I don't know what to do. And it was really my personal conversations with Frederik where I'm like, oh my goodness, you're right there and you're actually doing something using your own resources. And I'm like, individually, maybe I can donate a few $100s, like, right, individually. But I thought, what if I just asked around? What if I just asked other people? We could help you, Frederik. And so I did. And today, and I wrote it down because I'm like, every dollar counts. I'm like, $9,265 US, right? No, I mean, but you know, that whole like, can we make a difference? All I did was ask the people I know, right? And then suddenly other people ask. And the amazing thing is, because we're doing it not through a nonprofit, like people are sending this money to me personally. That's a lot of trust. Wow. That's a lot of trust. And that was a part of why Frederik and I did this one like little recording or live session recently to kind of let people know like who we are and why we're doing this, because they're giving money to us personally. And we're literally like, so Frederik is helping to identify the individuals right now, not only, these funds have gone to help not only for food and medicine for those whom Frederik is helping to house, but also there are individuals who are trapped essentially still in Ukraine, where they're helping, like say people, I mean, what Frederik said a little while ago struck me. It's one thing when these nonprofits can come in and serve the people who get in line, like who get in line for food, but what about the people who didn't make it to the line? Like, what about them? Like to start thinking about the people that are hidden, who have needs. And so these funds have gone directly to individuals who are there in like Kyiv, who are helping the elderly who are stuck on like the 8th floor of a building and the elevators don't work, that kind of thing. And so that's tangibly what we're doing now. And I think it's ongoing, right? That the needs are ongoing and continuous, but you even think about it, and even to the dollar, right? $5, that's going to buy him several meals, right? That's significant. And yeah, so just to start a little bit with, you know, the personal reason why I'm inspired to be here today. Yeah, I don't know if Frederik, if you wanted to say anything to that. If not, I can kind of continue. Yeah.
No, indeed. And what I really like is that it came up quite spontaneously, basically, when Nhien and I were talking, and just the people that Nhien has been able to mobilize, who also have been donating. I mean, this has really made such a change for so many people already, because I mean, a bread in Ukraine does not cost the same as a bread in Denmark, right? I mean, with the price of what you eat in like 3-4 days, you can feed somebody for almost a month there. So this is how really we've really been able to support so many people already.
Amazing.
And it's really, as Nhien said, we are really targeting the invisible people, the invisible victims, because I mean, one thing is that we target ones that are normally not seen. And the second thing is that there is no overhead. I mean, there's many organizations. I mean, you can donate to the United Nations and UNICEF and so on, which is very good. But you also have to take into account that half of your money basically goes to overheads and staff working for them and so on. Whereas we work purely through volunteer people who just say that my job, I don't have a job right now, so I can as well just stand in the line in the supermarket, buy as much food as I can take out, and then bring it to the people who need it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I love how you met each other through the Enneagram in a carefree situation, and now you're saving lives.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'm assuming most people don't know, Frederik and I met in July 2019, so not that long ago, at SAT in California. So one of Claudia Naranjo's SAT #1. So yeah, we met at an Enneagram event and have stayed friends since then. And I got to know his wife out there as well. Yeah, and so just how amazing that relationship has spawned. And speaking of the Enneagram, you know, again, like this isn't just about Ukraine, right? We're here to talk about, like, for me, the relevancy of the Enneagram in this moment. It struck me, Frederik, as you were talking about the individuals of Ukraine. I think, you know, what too often happens in the midst of war is the demonizing of one side and the creating of heroes on the other. And both are ways that we objectify people. Both are ways, right? That sort of like, even like I actually get a little irritated when people overemphasize that heroic aspect, because I feel like it separates that from us. There's something about the way, oh, we'll herald you, you're the bad guy, you're the good guy. But there's something about when we can look at the humanity of, like, it's more complicated than that, right? In Ukraine, there are folks who are stepping up and there are folks who are stealing. I mean, granted, if you're hungry and you're taking food, you know, there's something very human about that as well. But just to recognize that within this is, the more I think that we can tap into the awareness of the complexity of our humanity, then the more that we can really move into the space. Because to me, when people repeat this idea, especially when they're talking about, say, Putin, like, I can't believe, I have no idea how a person could do that. I'm like, well, we better have an idea, because if we don't have an idea, we cannot stop this from happening. If we can't see how a human being is capable of doing this, how we within ourselves have capacities that are capable of showing up in this way. You know, years ago, Hannah Arendt wrote about the banality of evil, right? This commonplace thing where if we're not aware of our own stuff and our capacities for both, quote, good and evil, then we're lost. But if we can lean into, like, how could this really happen, rather than distancing it, like, not me, I would never be like that, right? Then there's something that where we have a way in. And so with that, I think the Enneagram has been helpful to me and both, like, our community in a certain way. Like, one thing that we've been talking about among this panel here is the ending of othering. So this is very related to that, right? The objectifying of the hero or the demon, right? The ending of othering. And I think I want to give credit to Jessica Dibb, whom I believe really brought forth this concept recently in the Shift Network Enneagram, Global Enneagram event. And also in the IEA Global Conference, we're beginning to talk about this notion where if we look at the circle of the Enneagram and we start to really go, well, what numbers do I demonize? Like, where's my shadow in this? then when we kind of begin to sort of embrace our individual wholeness of like how we grapple with power or aggression, how we deal with fear, like can we embrace these truths within our humanity in a way that they don't come out unskillfully because they're still unconscious in us. And so in the evolving Enneagram communities, we do a lot of this work of even going around the whole circle to like, what's your relationship with either people of this number or the traits you normally equate with this number? And how do we lose the power of that point on the Enneagram because we've overly rejected or even made a hero, something outside ourselves of this attribute, right? Of this general quality of being. And so, of course, I'll invite you to jump in anytime, any of you, but because I can get on my thing, but really that at core, and I feel like the Enneagram is so useful in offering us that beginning framework for the individual work, but then also in community, and why I'm a little bit obsessed with, even evolving together as my topic for the Nordic conference. Why? Because in community, we come up against like what triggers us, right? There's something about the intimacy of our connection that it's not just about celebrating who thinks like me. And so like even within our groups, if we start to lean one way politically, because of course, personally, I lean a certain way politically, but my hope is that within the groups, we don't start saying us and them. Soon as we do that, I think we're lost, and so there's something about like remembering that if we're doing that, rather than have the circle of usness be closed, have the circle of us enfold what was historically the other. And if we can use the Enneagram sort of for that journey of embracing what was otherness into usness, then I think we begin to use the Enneagram in a way that is of service, to that whole, right? So yeah, any reflections?
Yeah, I have a question. So I think when we throw things at the others, it's the despair and the anger and the sadness. And where do we put that? Where do we address that if we don't address it against someone?
Yeah. So I definitely don't have all the answers about that. But one thing that I think both I would invite other Enneagram colleagues, to support people in is, I think if we don't first honor our actual response, like our emotional response, our mental response, that we're not just jumping to, oh, don't be angry at them, or don't be sad, or don't be afraid. But it's paradoxical, I believe, that it's actually the welcoming of that, of that within ourselves and the embrace of that is the beginning of the journey of then bringing that same embrace to the larger world, to the context of otherness. And so one practice that we apply in evolving Enneagram community is called welcoming prayer practice. It's literally dropping into a feeling as a sensation in your body. And then for those who do believe in a higher power, like a God, bringing in that higher power, it's almost as if there's like this, okay, so I welcome anger. I don't say, well, I shouldn't be angry because I want to be loved, like welcome anger. And then I let that be in my body and I let that move through me. And then as I do, then there's something that I've experienced that transmutes that anger, right? That then enables me to have a ground of being from which I can move that is more of a skillful response than a reaction from my anger or from my fear. And so a lot of the circles that I hold are designed for that, because people are like, why? Well, just like you're feeling your feelings, what's happening? I was like, but no. Like if you trust that there's some space in which this can be held, right? Even Frederik, I think because it was public, I can share, like in our Zoom that we did on Ukraine, we realized, I just watched as Frederik went from his head and dropped into his emotional space, right? For like the first time since he fled, right? And you could speak to that directly if you'd like, Frederik, but just the touching moment of this circle, which gave space for him to share about what was alive for him, brought forth this cathartic experience of his own exhaustion and his sorrow. Because even as he's helping people, he just lost his home. And maybe more importantly, your books, Frederik. But right? So yeah, I'd love even if you could speak to that experience, Frederik.
Yes, Frederik, please do.
Yeah, indeed, because I mean, my job requires me to just stay unemotional. I have to be very focused. We have to make sure that the aid is getting where it has to be and so on. But at the end of the day, I'm also human, right? I mean, I had to leave my house. Most of our belongings is there. I mean, you don't put, I mean, I'm 43 years old. In those 43 years, I've gathered lots of stuff, and you don't put it in a car, especially if you have a wife and if you have 2 kids and a nanny who's also coming with you. So you don't put that much in the car, and most is there. So we don't know when we'll see all of that back. So I have also lots of feelings that are coming up. And especially in the beginning, it was very difficult. And it was as if we were living in some kind of surreal place. And you have this cocktail of emotions that's coming up, and you don't even, you get even alexithemic because you don't even know what you're feeling anymore. It's just so many different, it's a cocktail of feelings. And I also feel lots of anger. I also feel, I feel anger towards what is happening, both from the Russian and from the Ukrainian side. I feel shame for me having been able to leave before it actually all started. I mean, there is this thing of like a survival guilt or something like that, right? So I also have something like that it's unfair that I could leave before the others. It's unfair that I'm a 5-star refugee. But I want to come back to some of the things that Nhien was saying, that really the Enneagram can really help here. Because, I mean, the first thing is that the Enneagram is not just a teaching. I mean, the most important thing is what you do with the teaching, right? And we can all listen to people like us speaking here, but that's not going to change us. That's not going to help us grow. I mean, your self-development happens by what you're doing in daily life, basically. And this is why I have actually decided that I have the chance to do something now, and that's what I'm going to do. And that's also why I'm very happy that the people around Nhien are also taking that decision, that they say that, look, we do what we can do. I mean, most of them are in the US, right? I mean, you cannot just say we'll welcome refugees, but at least you can say that we have financial means. And at this stage of my life, I'm going to give some financial means that are really going to help save many people. And this is what is really bringing in the human part of who we are. And that's what the Enneagram is basically teaching us, just to become better human beings. And it's not just a teaching for the head types, right? Where we like to philosophize. It's really about what you're doing. Now, the other thing is that I have decided not to watch the news anymore on Ukraine. I want to know what's happening. I want to know if the district where or houses, if it's still standing there. But I have decided not to look at the news anymore because I see so much hatred. I'm okay with seeing the destruction because I know that this is what is happening, and I'm okay with seeing that. But I get even more shocked by the negative messaging around dehumanizing the other. And really what Nhien was saying about this otherness and really taking away the human aspect of the other side. And I just don't want to be part of that. And I know that if I'm going, because I was on so many channels on Viber, WhatsApp, Telegram, that really give you lots of news, right? I mean, just there's like hundreds of posts every single day. And I decided that this is just sucking myself down. You get absorbed by it. And I don't want to be part of that anymore. And the other thing that I also noticed is that, as Nhien was saying, that there's so much like negative messaging on people. I mean, like saying that Putin is bad. Yes, I mean, what Putin is doing is bad, but let's not forget that he's also motivated by something. He must be traumatized himself. Let's not forget that. And it doesn't mean that, I mean, we're not trying to justify, but the Enneagram, I mean, the thing what the Enneagram does is the Enneagram explains what is happening. It doesn't justify what we're doing.
Mm.
But I think in order to stop the war, in order to have a long-lasting solution, we have to understand the core of the problem. And just saying that Putin is bad, the Russians are bad, that's very simplistic. We're not going to solve the conflict like that. Yes, we may end the war by bringing more evil in, right? But it's not going to bring a solution to the world. In the past, when there was a war, there was one winner and there was a loser. In wars nowadays, there are no more winners. There is always two losers, but there is one loser who loses even more than the other loser. And the question is, what can be done to stop that? How can we try to counterbalance that with some kind of positive vibes? And on our individual level, we're not going to change it. But if we have millions of people who just try on their own individual level, bringing in some kind of more positivity in whatever way it is. I mean, if it's just by sending some money, by helping some refugees, or by even just countering this dehumanization and trying to say that but the other side is also human. So I think that's a very important part here. And when people say that, look, oh, Putin is mentally sick or something like that, I don't know. Maybe he is, maybe he's not, but I don't want to be that judgmental, because many of the things that he does, I'm also like that. How would I be if I were in his position? I don't know. So let me not judge it. And let me try to see what we can do just to make the suffering of the people just less. Anyway, these are just my thoughts.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing, Frederik. So I also want to ask questions into, and it's for both of you, what can we as a community within the Enneagram do with the knowledge that we have, with the, to show this love across borders? What can we do as a community? What do you think?
If I can begin. I want to say two things that may sound completely opposite. I mean, I guess the first thing I want to say is that I don't know what is each person's to do, right? There's something about like the invitation to each individual here in their own gifts. An easy example of that is, for instance, even in our Evolving Enneagram community, many members are here today who gave to this cause. There was one individual who, she might not have the funds, but she created this art, right? This profound, moving art about Ukraine. And we sold it as a fundraiser for the event. Like that was from her giftedness of like something authentic to her to share, so there's something individual for each of us. Like even as I'm doing this fundraiser, I'm very conscious of the fact that you might hear about it and you might think, hey, the person in my neighborhood is suffering. I might be more inclined to support the person in my own neighborhood right now, but I'm reminded of that suffering because of what's going on here, right? That like, there isn't like okay, we all should be doing this sense, from the perspective from which I come. And my personal like sense of mission and vision of what we as a community are capable of with this profound tool and map is like how we as a community sort of rally those shared resources. For instance, even in the call with Frederik that we had, we talked about what about how, we say on a psychological level that it is wounded people who then wound people, right? And so right now, a mass population are being wounded. So how do we meet that with the Enneagram therapists who exist, the somatic healers that exist within our community to support the trauma that is happening so that that trauma is not passed on. So as a community, can we rally around how we can meet that? Even as Frederik was describing things like, oh yes, I can analytically maybe kind of make a guess, you know, we're kind of guessing what's Putin's type, what's President Zelensky's type, you know, and all that. And I think that's helpful, but it's never helpful in my view when it's just like, we'll see, because they're that number, they're doing this, versus, oh, if I know that you're self-pres dominant and you just lost your house, I might have even a little extra compassion for you, because I recognize that what may not be traumatic to a self-pres blind like is traumatic to you. And so that's going to bring forth greater compassion. If we can look around, even like within our Enneagram community, and go, we're going to be called to this work from these different gifts and from these different perspectives as to what the biggest need is. And instead of arguing with one another, like, no, we need food, no, we need passion, you know, to really recognize that perhaps we need all of it. And depending on our unique orientation in the Enneagram, that's what's ours to give and to offer. So that piece of it, right? And so a lot, I think it can happen with our community. And I think the last thing I'll say about that is, like, on that community level, there's the piece of even just remembering our power, remembering again, like from, right, like as a community to do something right about this. It is, I think, the beginning of it. Just like for me personally, it's like, oh, I can do this, because I can look at a lot of things I cannot do right now, that I cannot help with, you know. And if I become debilitated by that, I think I just want to say, before I kind of pass it on to Frederik, there's a video that our fellow Enneagram teacher, Mara Sikora, shared with me recently of a Buddhist teacher who talks about compassion. She deals a lot with death row inmates, and so those in hospice. And this focus of compassion, she says, there are enemies to compassion. And one of those is pity. And one of those is like terror. One of those is like moral righteousness. And that if we recognize, because I see people who are like, oh, I'm watching the news, all, you know, I'm just sad and now I'm debilitated. So let's, if you can gauge yourself personally and decide how you will choose to resource yourself in a way that empowers you to show up in your life and for our world, right? Like, instead of like maybe confusing compassion with something that's like, oh, I'm just going to emote or relate to this, right? How can I skillfully choose, based on even knowing my Enneagram type, what's going to resource me at this time, so that I can begin with that sense of empowerment and show up in the world with what my unique thing to give is in this moment, right? So that's what I have to share. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe I can also bring in my thoughts here, what we can all do. And I fully agree with Nhien. I think that the first thing we should just do is just have empathy for all the suffering that is there and come up with compassion for everybody, no matter which side of the conflict you're at. I mean, everybody deserves this empathy and compassion. But again, this needs to be done in a very conscious manner. It should not be done in a way where you let yourself be triggered by your own trauma, basically, because this is what happens very, very often. We just get triggered by our own trauma, and it's not true empathy, it's not true compassion. And I think what we should really do is really see humanity in everything. I mean, we should try to counter this dehumanizing which wars do. It's something you see in every single war, because in order to kill the enemy, you have to make sure that the enemy is not a human, because if not, a soldier is not going to be able to kill the enemy. The enemy has to be a pig, the enemy has to be an animal, the enemy has to be just a useless being somewhere. And this is what happens in every war, but I think we need to counter that as much as we can, again, on our individual level. And the other thing that we can do is really just help wherever we can. And as Nhien said, I mean, some people give money, some people make a painting which is then sold. And it doesn't matter how much you're doing. I think your intention is probably even more important than the real support that you're giving. because it's really the mindset from which you are doing this, which is going to have a healing power for the whole world, I think. Yeah, so that's what I think we can all do.
Wow.
So there's
Thank
a
you so much.
question in the chat. Probably one of the most difficult questions to ask any philosopher or theologian. So you don't think that people can just be evil? A question asked by Peter. I actually want to address it. Not that I know the answer, but I think my answer is very pragmatic, in that at one level, I think when we talk about evil, too often it's almost like, here's our humanity and there's evil outside. And there's something about, if you're willing to enfold what Putin or other, quote, evil people have done into the sphere of what we call our humanity, and recognize, like, even as Frederik was saying, like, these pieces that I'm capable. Have I acted out of fear? Have I acted out of anger? Maybe if I had a little bit more power and I acted out of my anger, it might have a different effect than it does, it just in my personal life, right? If we're capable of seeing that. So irrelevant, like what we call it, whether we call it, like, from my unity perspective, it might just be like, I actually don't believe people are fundamentally evil. I believe people are fundamentally whole and good, but I believe that we can commit acts that terrorize and harm one another in very significant ways when we have lost connection to, like, a fundamental sense of, like, our being or ourselves. And so this just happens to be my perspective. But even if you claim that, right, it's like it doesn't do us any good to cast it out there, right? Because then we can't do anything with it. There's something about separating it versus, like, comprehending it, like getting inside of it. Where's the humanity in even what is considered to be an evil act? And if we can feel into the fear or the anger or the grief that drives that, maybe we have a way of speaking to or connecting with, like, for instance, I'm just beginning to do some prison ministry. We're talking, so I'm going into some local prisons here and speaking to inmates who are like, how are we capable of committing these crimes? Like, what in us can murder, right? But there's something about, like, if I become a trustworthy person, I become a bridge into another way of being or another choice, right? But as soon as I've relegated you, like, if you're outside the circle, that's impossible. So, right, then that evil will continue to have harm, and we will be completely inefficacious to do anything about it, right? So that's my perspective on evil. Yeah.
And me personally, I actually don't believe in evil and good. I again, it's a very philosophical discussion, right? I just believe in cause and effect, because the question is really, like, what is evil? Because what may be evil for somebody may be something good for the other. The other thing is that our entire civilization is built on the evil of the past. If we're just looking at history, for example, what do we learn? History books, this are just a glorification of the evil acts of our ancestors, right? If I look, for example, in Belgium, how could Belgium become so rich? Because of what we've been doing in Congo. If we're looking at the US, how has the US become what it has become? As the Belgian foreign minister 20 years ago or so said, and it was not really appreciated, but he said the biggest massacre and genocide ever in human history happened on the North American continent, basically. So the question is really, like, what exactly is evil? And I'm not saying that killing is, like, something that should happen, or, I mean, it's not good or not bad. I don't like using these terms. I just believe that there are certain things that happen in human history and they have a certain effect later on. But we just have different energies in ourselves, and indeed there are maybe some less nice aspects and maybe some less. I would prefer to refer to responsible behavior and irresponsible behavior instead of evil and good. And I think we both have these responsible and irresponsible aspects inside of ourselves. And if you're the president of a country, then this irresponsible behavior is going to show up completely different than if you are just the father of a household. But you may do things maybe even worse than a president who's killing people.
And in Buddhism, where they will teach, you know, rather than that duality of good and evil, just what's skillful and not skillful, or in other words, is adaptive versus maladaptive. And I think to this, I noticed, you know, that Dr. Khaled is here, and that I know that a lot of my community members have been really excitedly learning about something core to his work, which is this integral model. So I just want to kind of put a plug for that, because for me, the Enneagram plus that model helps you begin to understand. It's almost like without that label of good or bad, developmentally where someone might be, in a way that if we can really honor and meet that in ourselves as well as in our fellow human beings, that's how we evolve, right? That's how we grow. If we could honestly and genuinely meet that, like, again, rather than the cries of, I don't see how they do it, or this is impossible. Well, if you still think that way, you are separate from like the possibilities for a solution, right? To resolve it. So that model has helped my community members even begin to understand different nations and countries, and both the Enneagram lens and the integral or spiral lens through which someone might be operating, right? That helps us to start again looking beyond our individual development, but like moving into like the usness of like this more unified world, right? A more complete world. So yeah.
And
thank you so much.
yeah, thank you guys.
Light topic. So yeah. Thank you.
I look so much forward to meeting you in Stockholm at the Nordic conference and have more chats with you about various things.
Absolutely.
Do you want to say something, Patrick, before we close this part and let everyone have a word and stop the recording?
Yeah, no, I'm just so grateful for you sharing your point of views and what you've been through, and it's very inspiring, very, very inspiring actually. So it's just, I think it's bringing us together, and yeah, just like Annabella said, I can't wait to meet you guys really. So thank you so much for participating in our call here.
Something I feel you brought into the Enneagram world is like real talk. So Frederik, you were one of the first ones to bring in sexuality, which was a taboo in the Enneagram world, obviously. And now we're talking about war and real life experience. That's beautiful. Instead of just talking theory, we're talking real life in the real world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you for having us. And so good to see folks from all over the world here. Yeah.
It's always nice to chat with you. Normally we talk about other things, right? This is a more serious topic today, but equally important, I think.
And everyone's writing, thank you.